Into it. Right into it.
Let's do it.
We're going live today.
It's another Friday. This week I did it my way. I made lots of juice, and now I feel
Feels weird. It sounds
Baby
weird.
say, oh, it's the way I make my juice. Pressing fruits and
Not my normal beat.
This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.
What's up, my juice lovers? Welcome to Good Nature Radio. This is your host, Charlie Wetlaufer, joined by the two top juice business consultants and juice instructors in the world, Chef Ari Sexner, author of The Juicing Companion, and Olivia Esquivel, founder and owner of Southern Press Juicery, their award-winning juice bar. Welcome to Good Nature Radio, the weekly Friday podcast where the juicing industry comes together to get help with starting and growing a juice bar, home-based juice business, or cold-pressed juice delivery company. Don't forget, you can shop for bulk juice bar supplies in the Goodnature Marketplace at goodnature.com. And if you want to get a quote for consulting and leave us a message, head over to goodnature.com/radio. And don't forget to join in on the discussion on the Good Nature Juicing Facebook group. Just head over to Facebook and search for Good Nature Juicing. You'll find our private group there, which I think is approaching 4,000 members, if I'm not mistaken. Lots of over there every single day. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on shelf life and how to extend shelf life of cold-pressed juice. This is kind of a big topic. We've talked about it a lot on previous episodes, but we're going to do a super targeted deep dive today. We're going to be talking about time and temperature abuse, using the right equipment, how acidity affects juice, HPP, pasteurization, UV processing, freezing juice, and the dirty word, preservatives. Going to be talking about it all today. Holding nothing back.
As if we
There's
ever
going to be
do.
at least one bombshell episode. Okay. Shocking. Let's see. Do I have a sound effect for that? Maybe not. Bombshell episode. No, that's stupid. That's not the right sound effect. I need a better sound effect for that.
It sounded like that Snap Crackle Pop Rice Krispie cereal. Agree.
Okay, here we go. Let's start with. All right, first of all, just as a reminder, we launched the School of Juice in July. If you'd like some professional, high production value juicing courses done by Ari and Olivia, check out learn.goodnature.com. Also, we've written a lot about shelf life on the blog, the Good Nature blog. So if you want to check out research and articles I've written, you can head over to the blog at goodnature.com, and we have a nice little search bar there. Just type in shelf life and you'll see a bunch of articles come up. And Good Nature actually has a bit of a history with shelf life. Back when, in 1997, when there was the infamous E. coli breakout in Odwalla juice, because they were using raw apple juice in their products, and they used some dirty apples, and a bunch of people got sick, including, I think, a couple deaths and some long-term, lifelong issues with some people that consume the juice. So in 1997 is when the USDA came out and regulated raw juice sales and said you can no longer sell raw juice wholesale. In other words, you can't sell raw juice to a retailer that then resells it. You can only sell it direct to consumers. So back then, my dad was running the company, and he kind of freaked out when that happened. And so Goodnature started building pasteurizers because we thought nobody was going to be buying juice presses anymore. So Goodnature built and sold pasteurizers for many years. We actually just got out of the pasteurizer market permanently just a couple of years ago, because we never felt like it was core to our business. It was kind of like this weird other thing we did, you know, because after it was clear that actually raw juice wasn't going anywhere and it became actually more popular, then we were like selling the world's best juice presses for raw cold pressed juice, and then also selling pasteurizers, which is kind of weird, you know. So just kind of a weird thing. It was like us as owners were never really into it. It was just kind of something my dad decided to do as for survival of the company. So we refocused, and finally it actually ended up most of our customers were in the beer industry buying pasteurizers for beer. So we're selling like raw juice presses and beer pasteurizers. It's kind of funny. But anyway, so our company actually knows quite a bit about shelf life and preservation. We're building pasteurizers. We experimented with lots of other technologies that we're going to talk about today. And some people at our company have become experts in it. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I have researched it quite a bit. But there are a couple other people at our company that are definitely experts in preservation and shelf life of juice. Which I have, picked their brains when I was writing articles and stuff. So that's kind of the background here. Now we can get into the good stuff. So the first item I have on my list is time and temperature abuse. And basically, this is a term used in the industry for allowing food to get warm, like past a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. And Ari, maybe you can kind of give more details on that, like high level details and what that means.
So like time in lieu of, there's a lot of different options for this. There's time and temperature abuse. First of all, I think it's really important to understand the general overview of juice, bottled juice. Okay, it's classified as a prepared product, so no matter what, you have a 7-day shelf life. Okay, which is extremely important.
You mean the maximum is 7 days?
Yeah, 7 days is a maximum. Now there's all these different factors that can go in, which is extremely important to understand the health department, your operation, the sanitation practices, because there's a lot of different options and routes you can go that can help your operation. Because every time I say 7-day shelf life, a lot of operators will say, I have water with a little bit of lemon, and a little bit of cayenne, and I give it a 15-day shelf life or 20-day shelf life. You have to get it approved first. I think that's extremely important to understand. There's a bunch of different variances that you can go through with the health department. You got to stick with the 7-day max shelf life at the very most. I would recommend 4 to 5 days. I always recommend 4 to 5 days because after that, the flavor and color start changing. So I think that's important to get out there first anyways.
Right. Sorry, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
So there's the microbial shelf life, which is sort of the safety aspect. And then there's the sensory shelf life, color and taste and separation, that kind of thing. So you can look at those as two separate things. Like just because it's safe to drink at 5 days or 6 days or 7 days doesn't necessarily mean the juice looks good sitting on your shelf or it tastes good. Like maybe it starts to go bitter or starts to separate or turn brown. So that's two separate things to think about, which is all related to this time and temperature.
Yeah. So that's why I recommend 4 to 5 day shelf life too. Because after that, that's when you'll see the color start changing and then the flavor starts changing right after that in almost every case. Plus, someone buys a juice, they might not finish that day, put it in the fridge. They don't want to come to a sour tasting juice the next day, so sticking with like a 4 to 5 day, it kind of gives them a little bit of buffer in case they don't drink it the first day as well.
But So what are the so first of all, when they talk about time and temperature, what is the specific kind of temperature you look for?
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to get too off track and on these little routes for sure. So you have 4 hours to get your product out of the temperature danger zone. So anything above 41 degrees in terms of juice is in the temperature danger zone. So you have 4 hours to bring that down below that temperature. What's also important to consider is the quicker you bring that down below 41 degrees, the higher quality juice you're going to have. You know, you got to think of it kind of like you're in the temperature danger zone. You're living in like dog years. That time is kind of dissipating rapidly. Okay, so if it takes you a full 4 hours to bring your juice down below 41 degrees, you need to fix that right away. Okay, at most you should have it take you an hour or two to get below 41 degrees. The quicker you get below 41 degrees, the higher quality product you're going to have. That's why a lot of operations might be in a refrigerated room or a very cool environment, or you wash produce the night before and let it cool in the reach-in, is because you get your produce really cold. You juice it on the cold press, which won't add any heat to the process, and you might even be below 41 degrees after you juice that. So getting it below 41 as quickly as possible, but you do have 4 hours.
Yeah, I always recommend people try to keep the whole process below 41 the entire time. Mm-hmm. Start with cold produce at like 38 degrees or something and process it all. Mm-hmm. Ideally, you're in a cold room, but that's not realistic for most of our customers because they're using a shared kitchen space or they don't have a refrigerated room. But definitely the larger companies are juicing in rooms that are 40. How cold are those rooms? Are they 41?
Usually a little bit above
45.
About 45 or so, yeah.
I mean, it's cold. It's like,
mm-hmm.
It's kind of miserable to work in, to be honest.
Yeah.
For long periods of time.
I did that for 2 years. Like you go in, your joints start like feels like you have arthritis.
Especially juicing though, because there tends to be like splashing and liquid, and you're like washing produce, and like it's so cold.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's that enjoyable to do. But if you really want the best product, it's something you should consider. Yeah, and also, sorry, I don't know if you mentioned this, but even letting the juice get above the temperature, even for a short period of time, can affect the color and taste. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and one thing not a lot of people consider, there's a bunch of little things that really help out this process. Like there's that if you can't be in a refrigerated room, you're having issues, check out those chill sticks or magic wands they have. You know, the paddles that it's made out of water cooler material. You fill it with water and freeze it.
It's like an ice wand.
Yeah, ice wand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually chills it. I prefer that over an expensive blast chiller any day, because you can have the large container sitting on the counter and just keep pouring in the juice as you're making it, and it's probably below 41 by the time you go. A couple other things is I talked to a client. They were having issues bringing it down below 41. They were using glass bottles. Mm-hmm. And the thing that helped them was actually refrigerating the bottles, you know?
Right. Yes.
They just threw them in the cooler. They had zero issues. It helped their quality of juice immediately. You know, they just put it in, and because not a lot of people realize if you bottle and cap a juice that's above 41 degrees, it takes so much longer for the internal temperature of that juice to get below 41 degrees. You know, you might hit 40 degrees, take it out, bottle the juice. Could probably reach up to 45 degrees if you're in like some hot weather place, and then you cap it, and you won't believe how long that takes you to bring that juice down.
Can I just interject here, just from a maybe if there's some listeners that are new or they're starting their business and they're not quite sure like why we're talking about this. This is because this is something that's going to be inspected by Department of Health. So for instance, from an operations standpoint, when Department of Health comes in, you know, it's a little bit tricky. It's sort of to our advantage, I would say, that our juices are capped, because it's been very rare, knock on wood, that a Department of Health inspector has come in and unsealed a sealed bottle that's in my refrigerator to test the temp. Now, what they have done is come in and open like a to-go salad box, put their thermometer in my salad, tested the temp there, and then, recorded that. I have had them sort of, open the refrigerator, the retail refrigerator, grab a bottle, sort of feel it with their hand, measuring it, obviously also looking at the temperature of the fridge. But basically they're trying to figure out, did they just juice this and stick it right in the fridge? Like if it feels warm temperature or not as cold as the rest of the fridge, what they're trying to do is essentially catch us in the act of, are we properly bringing down that temperature, getting that product out of the temperature danger zone, so that, because anytime it hits that above 41 degrees for longer than 4 hours, like Chef said, that's when it becomes dangerous for the consumer. That's when organisms can start to grow and you can start to get bacteria. And so we want to quickly get it out of that zone. But so just be aware, like if you're in an inspection and it's a new inspection for you, they may come back and test your juice in the back of the house. Just make sure that after you're juicing that, like Chef is saying, you're either putting it into the fridge, into the back cooler, or doing it with an ice wand. And that's something you're communicating to Department of Health, because you can lose points right away if you're not explaining the process of, yes, it's not at temp yet, but we are going to bring it to temp before we put it out for sale. Like that's the part where people miss a lot, is like communicating that, and they may just get like points taken off because it's not at temp yet. So just something to think about.
Yeah, and I would say beyond that, I think, like Ari's point about the ice wand, you should be trying to bring it down close to temp before putting it. Like if you have like a 3-gallon bucket of juice, the juice in the middle of that bucket can actually take quite a long time to come down to temp. I learned that in the Serve Safe course, where they're saying, like, a lot of people don't realize it. For example, if you take a pot of hot chili, like say you're running a restaurant, you have a pot of hot chili, you put that in the walk-in cooler after you make it at night, the next day, the center of that hot chili may still be like 100 degrees or like 80 degrees or something, So that means a lot of the chili was sitting all night in the temperature danger zone, where is when those microbes can keep reproducing quickly. So then, if there is something bad in there, like salmonella or E. coli or whatever, that's when you get into danger, was when it reproduces and becomes enough to be dangerous. Because even if there's a little bit in your food, that can be fine. Like your body can get rid of a certain amount, but if it's too much and you take in too much of that harmful stuff, is when people get into trouble.
Yeah, I think it's one of those rare instances where the sanitation and the quality of product are both on the same side, where, the cooler the juice is or quicker it is below temperature danger zone, the quality and the safety of the product. So, and that magic, that ice wand or whatever you want to call it, it's amazing because it's probably the cheapest solution, but it also works the best,
Yeah. I get a lot of comments like on our YouTube videos and blog and stuff. People are like, how do I naturally extend the shelf life of raw cold pressed juice to over 90 days without pasteurization or preservative? It's like, you can't.
Please let us know.
You just can't. That's like asking, hey, how do I cut an apple in half and leave it open on the counter for 3 months and it doesn't go bad? Yeah. It's like it just doesn't have it. Like as soon as you start processing the food, as soon as you peel it or cut it or grind it or press it, like that clock starts ticking,
Yeah. And why would you want to? Like we get that so often, like I need 15 days or I need 20 days. You're serving a raw cold pressed juice. People seek that out compared to the further processed products that they get in grocery stores because they want a fresh product. They don't want to get a raw juice that's been sitting around for 14 days. They want some 1, 2, 3 days, they don't want.
I totally agree. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
Is it hasn't been on a shelf for 3, It was just made today or just made yesterday, and it's fresh.
Yeah.
This is completely different than what you buy in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, so let's get into equipment. So you got the time and temperature down. It's also important to make sure you're using a real cold press machine, a real juice press, like a Goodnature machine, because the other machines, whether it's a masticating one, which they sometimes refer to as cold press, which isn't really, or a centrifugal machine, you get a lot more of the solids in there, so a lot more of the pulp and the foam and the little bits of skins and seeds and stuff, and that will drastically reduce shelf life. You'll get a lot more separation. The juice will turn brown. So instead of getting up to like 5 days, you might only get up to like 2 or 3.
Is that true also if you're using a Samick?
No,
because is that
okay.
still? Yeah, so that's not going to affect the shelf life.
No, I mean, so the Samick is like the grinding
right,
process.
The grinding component, yeah.
As long as you're still pressing it in a real press, it's like it's the. So the problem is the masticating and the centrifugal machines are all one step. All it is grinding. So the masticating machine is really just grinding against a metal screen, and they never have that second step of pressing, where they're pulling the juice out of the fiber. So you're only getting the juice. Instead, they're just kind of like grinding a bunch of it through the screen. So it's the pressing step is super important.
Yeah. There's two critical steps is the grinding and pressing, you know, and if you add a slight amount of heat during that grinding, so the Samick is usually works completely fine, but unless people crank it all the way up and let it run for a long time, then that can generate some heat. But typical processing on that, it shouldn't, you know, so.
Yeah. I mean, I know that it's not great for batching out. Like, you know, I've talked to clients that are using a Samick. Like there are other cons to the Samick, but I guess my question, you answered it, was it's not going to affect the shelf life, but it does, as we know, slow down production and yield and all of that other stuff.
And there's a lot more potential for user error.
Yeah.
You know, like over processing, too high, too long. Yeah.
I would say Samick can increase efficiency if you're using like an X1 Mini, because it can be grinding and pressing at the same time. But I think once you get up to the X1 machine, the grinder on the X1 is much faster. It's much more efficient. Like Ari said, there's much less room for error, because with the Samick, you're basically just spinning a blade and you decide how long to let that spin, because it's in like a bowl, right? So it just keeps the blade keeps going around. So you can over grind, you can under grind, which will drastically affect the yield. If you over grind, you're going to get the press overflowing. If you undergrind, you're going to get like 30% less juice. So look, if you're a one-person operation and you've got the process down pat and you like know that thing like the back of your hand is probably fine, it'll still slow you down a bit with the X1. Like the EG260 grinder on the X1 is much faster. But if you have employees running the machine, I would absolutely probably stay away from the Samick. Yeah. And try to just stick to the grinder attached to the juice press. That's kind of my advice.
Yep.
Okay. Acidity. Let's talk about acidity, Ari.
Yeah, I do a lot with acidity because there's special processes and variants. I'm not going to get too technical with it, but pH has a danger zone just like a temperature danger zone. Okay, it's got a range in which it's most dangerous, or pathogens can grow rapidly, and basically that's between 4.6 to 7. Okay, so the lower the number, the more acidic the product is. So anything below 4.6 is perfect, and that's where that's where you want your product to be, because that's where 4.5 or below, it's challenging for the pathogens, the 5 major pathogens in juice, to actually reproduce and grow in the product. So that's pretty important. I would recommend getting testing on that. I talked to a lot of people about lab testing. It seems extremely complicated, but it's probably the easiest process to do. You know, you can talk, there's tons of certified labs all over. I use a company called Certified Laboratories forever. Just they've always been really easy to work with. And basically you take a sample of your juice, you send it over to them. They could do a pH testing. I think it's like $15. You know, it's that simple. You just overnight a 2-ounce portion of juice. They could also do pathogen testing, but for pH, you could do that. What's really great about being familiar with the sanitation process, all these requirements, is you can have special variances for a lot of your stuff to make it a lot easier for your production. So one of the major variances is you get below a certain pH, like 3.5 is kind of, it's not even that acidic. You can get a variance for, like, if you make dressings or anything like that, and actually extend the shelf life from the required 7-day to like 14 days or plus.
By variance, you mean the local health department approving a longer shelf life?
Yeah, because it's 7 days, that's required. You can ask for a variance to make that longer if you hit these certain requirements. And that involves kind of that third-party testing and stuff.
Can't you just test pH with like a little test strip or something?
You can. It's I haven't found a good one, but
Okay.
but they're like $20-$30. Probably because I buy a $20 or $30 pH tester. But
Charlie, would you
I
buy
should
him a
learn by now.
solid pH tester?
but you have to do it quarterly, but also a third party lab does it, and you kind of have both to compare to make sure.
Okay, so this isn't something you're doing every time. It's just like
once
quarterly.
a quarter.
Okay, That's not bad. What else falls into that range? Like, is citrus juice below 3.5?
Yeah, basically, you want to get below 4.6 for sure, and that is like water with like a touch of lemon in there. You know, it's like the mildest of lemonade. You know, it's not acidic at all. You know, it just has a hint of it, and that'll be hit within below 4.6.
But I mean, I think the point is it is a struggle to have everything in your juice bar have a 3 to 4 day shelf life. Like for me, from an operation standpoint, when you're doing mega volume and I can't work with a 3-day shelf life. Now, there are some things that I cut off at 4 days, like my almond milk, and that includes the day that it was pressed. That just is what it is. But I've applied for variances, and I know that my almond milk, when I add cacao powder to it, alkalinizes it, lowers the pH level of it, and now I can actually take that chocolate version of that milk to, I think I take it to 6 or 7 days, according to the pH level and a simultaneous taste test and shelf sort of visual test. And so that's what I always recommend people that I'm talking to. I'm like, look, in an ideal world, it's pretty to think so that we can all operate on a 2-day shelf life. But when you're actually doing like major volume, that's very, very difficult to keep your fridge stocked, and turn that amount of product over in 2 days. Like, it's really, really difficult. So just knowing that you can go as far as 7 days, as long as it's right, because it's the same as like when you cut a tomato, right, chef? Like if you put a tomato on a salad and you haven't cut it and it's a round little tomato, then it can go X amount of days. But the second you cut it and you penetrate it and the skin opens, then it's now considered a prepared food. So it has to have a max of 7-day shelf life. Right. So don't freaking cut the tomato on your salad. Just leave it whole. Right. Like those are little things that you consider when you're trying to extend shelf life of things. But it's the same thing with juice. And it's a problem that I actually find a lot of clients have. Like they come to me and they're like, I can't add any more juice. Like, why can't you add any more juice? Like, what do you mean? You only have 5 SKUs. Well, Olivia, I can't juice every day. I like to give my clients fresh juice every day. And I'm like, whoa. First of all, like we have to talk about what is pretty to think so and what is an actual business decision. If that product is just as safe for a consumer to drink 4, 5, or 7 days later, right? And we've done the pH test of it. Department of Health tells us it's safe and it looks as good as it did on the first day. Because those, like Ari said, those two things don't always line up. Now you have to make the decision as an owner operator. yes, Olivia, maybe it will go 7 days, but at 6 days it looks terrible. Fine, then give it 6 days. But I'm not just going to give everything a 2 or 3 day shelf life because I like to make it for you fresh. Those are two different things. And for me, it's really important that you, one, know the pH level of every single juice. Even if you're using a crappy little pH tester, at least it gives you some idea of where you are. And then if you're really thinking about profitability in your juice bar, I talk about like a lot of enhanced waters, enhanced lemonades. Like those are things that I do think that you should create, that you should apply for a variance for, that you should simultaneously do your own pH level test and your own taste test and say, look, it could have gone 30 days, but I'm going to label it 21 days because that's when it looked great, tasted great, and that's what I feel safe with. To me, like you kind of have to think of like, with my chef mind of like, yes, I would love to prepare things for you every single day, but then also just the ability to execute that is really, really difficult. But of course, you would never want to date something that's going to make somebody sick, of course, or make it look ugly. So you have to find that, and it's different for every juice.
Yeah, and the way people should be thinking about their juice recipes is how do we get this recipe into that range? I mean, if you do, for example, straight carrot juice has very high pH, so very low acidity, that will go bad very quickly, like within a couple days. Which it's not a coincidence that one of the most popular carrot juice recipes for juice bars is carrot juice and orange juice.
Right.
With one or more things, other things added, but because orange juice being citrus has a very low pH, so high acidity, so that will extend that carrot juice up to the regular like 5 days or whatever. Apple juice is also actually fairly high acid, so that's why apple juice is a great base for cold pressed juice. Apple juice, I'm just looking at a list on USDA right here. It ranges from like 3.5 to about 4.2. So that's pretty low. So like if you have something over the 4.5 target, you can bring it down a little bit with some apple, adding lemon to basically any juice, right?
Yeah, those are the two biggest challenges is pure celery juice and the plant-based milks. Those are the two biggest challenges because you can't really add acidity to that, or the purest of the pure celery, like it's just celery and that's it. So those are.
I have to tell you that like a lot of the people that I'm talking to right now, celery is spiking. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I am. Celery price is spiking right now. And I'm telling people, pull it off of your menu right now. Like, first of all, not a lot of people like celery juice in a bottle. That is something that they typically want juiced right there in that moment because they read Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop article and they want to see you make it and they want to drink it at 7 a.m. on an empty stomach. Like, but the price is skyrocketing right now. So I tell them to either like add lemon to it and you just label it a celery and lemon and extend the shelf life because it's so volatile. I mean, it's not even good after like 2 or 3 days taste wise, or just don't make it or make it special order. But a lot of people are having trouble with that right now because they've locked in celery to so many of their recipes and the food cost is just really terrible on that right now. So just something to think about.
Or raise the price.
Yeah.
And then the people that really want it will pay the higher price.
Yeah.
And the other people won't.
Yeah. Yeah. Like what I do is I say like it requires a special order. And then by the way, whatever it yields, like if you want a 6-pack of it, if it yields 8, you have to take 8. Or I just put those 2 in the fridge and I know that at least 2 will sell. But I definitely don't want people right now juicing like 24 bottles of celery. It's just.
And then for a special order, what? You have like a minimum amount they have to order?
Yeah. Like a 6-pack. Because I have an X1, so I can't juice 1 bottle of celery.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times there's really great recipes that, I'll say to chef, like, hey, how can I extend the shelf life of this? And you add a little bit of lemon, or you add a little bit of lime, or you add a little bit of grapefruit or some citrus. And so that's a great thing to kind of, if you're facing that issue, like a lot of your advanced greens, that don't have fruits, but you're looking for some acid, some acidity in there to bring down the pH level, I would say like hit Chef Ari up for that and see like what would be a good acidity to add to that and sort of revamp those so that you can extend the shelf life on those.
I think that's kind of your only option of things you can add to the juice, unless you want to get into preservatives. So I guess this is a good segue for preservatives.
Sure.
Which anyone that follows the podcast knows I'm highly, highly against adding any sort of chemical preservatives like citric acid, which, by the way, is vitamin C. So you might think, well, what's the problem with adding vitamin C? But okay, but you're literally adding a chemical preservative to your juice. It is no longer pure cold pressed juice. You're altering the product. It's now no better than the juice at the grocery store. I mean, it's just, in my opinion, just a big no-no. And like, if I walked into a juice bar and they were adding citric acid or any preservative to the juice, I would never shop there again. Like, that's how I feel.
Just add orange.
Yeah, or
just
lemon,
add orange
or
to
like
the menu.
whatever.
Or lemon, like.
Yeah.
It is just so crazy to me to think about like pouring like a white powdered substance into pure raw juice. It's just crazy.
What do they call it? So the citric acid is kind of like synthetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's both. There's
processed?
naturally derived and there's synthetic. So if you're buying synthetic, it's basically they take fruit and they process it until they get the pure citric acid out. But I mean that process takes like adding chemicals to like, and it's like made in a lab. Basically, it's still made in a lab, even if it's naturally derived.
That's the biggest thing is people don't realize. Like I didn't know until that company Certified Laboratories. I call them all the time with like the craziest questions, and they have scientists there that actually answer them. And like I'm so impressed. Like it takes me a while. I Google a lot of the words that they have in there to figure it out. But I remember I talked to them, and I just realized like the synthetic or the citric acid is exactly the same as kind of processed sugar versus raw sugar. You know, like the sugar from produce is so much better for you than actually processed sugar. Yeah. You know, and it's the same thing with the vitamins.
Yeah, processed
the
sugar,
natural
like
vitamin.
Standard table sugar comes from beets. You know, like that cheap, like powdery white sugar you find in a restaurant, that comes from beets. It's like beet sugar basically, and then regular sugar, other sugar comes from sugar cane. I mean, there's all sorts of sources of sugar, but it's
same thing with like the lab processed vitamins. You know, and that's how they explain it too. Is like you see the vitamin C tablet, and it's like 1,000% of your daily value, and he's like, it's that amount that you're taking, but your body doesn't process nearly that amount. Like if you get 10% of vitamin C from a lemon compared to 1,000 of processed, you know, it's probably not even that amount.
There's not any even real science that supplements actually do anything for you, like the pill lab made supplements. I think, I mean, the whole point of drinking juice is to get nutrients you need without taking that crap, right? I mean, why are you spending $10 on a cold pressed juice if you're just gonna pop pills? I don't know, but look, there's plenty of people that take supplements and believe in them, and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I have yet to see convincing evidence that lab-made supplements actually do anything for you. And you can usually get what you need from actual whole food sources. So
yeah, I love the way Annie Parks put it from Balance B. You know, like it's a supplement if you can't get it from like produce or your daily diet.
Supplementary. There you go.
Yeah, so it's like I'm having an issue getting all my vitamin C for the day and what I'm consuming, so I'll take some vitamin C. Then that's a good option, you know. But don't just take it and be like, oh, I don't need any other vitamins for the rest of the day.
Makes a lot of sense. You know? A lot of people get so obsessed with protein. Like, gotta have enough protein. Gotta have enough protein. Like, I think people get enough protein in general. Most people, but they try to take like bodybuilders made it popular to take like massive amounts of protein for somehow that got into people's heads that you as a normal person need to take that much, like consume that much protein. It just seems crazy to me. But again, that's something else I could be wrong about. I'm not claiming to be an expert on this stuff. Yeah, like when I'm sick, my wife will hand me like a little cup with like 7 supplements in it and make me take it, but that's pretty much the only time I'll do it. But
Again, happy wife, happy life.
exactly.
Follow the rules, boys.
All you have to do is give up all your hopes and all your dreams and all your aspirations.
And all your
then your wife
beliefs.
will be
Just
happy.
take the pills, man.
Then all your wife will be happy and you'll be happy. So
That's right.
okay.
Drink up.
Okay, so now we can get into some actual processing methods that can extend shelf life. Trying to think, should we do freezing first or at the end? Let's leave it for the end. Let's do.
Okay.
Why, you got excited about that?
I was going to say a lot of people ask about freezing.
No, I do.
I think more
know.
people
I see it all
ask
the time.
about freezing than the other, so I would say freezing first.
Yeah, so let's leave it till the end so they listen to the whole podcast.
Oh, you're so smart.
Cliffhanger.
All right, so HPP is probably the most popular method of processing to extend shelf life. So there are several methods of processing where you can extend shelf life and achieve what they call 5-log reduction in microbial count, which is 5-log is 99.999%. So that's how much you have to bring down the microbial count, according to the USDA, to consider it safe for wholesale sales. So if you want to sell to a grocery store that's going to resell it, you have to achieve that 5-log reduction. And HPP is considered the most natural method. Well, no, we'll get to UV later, but HPP is considered one of the most natural methods. It's taking bottled juice in plastic bottles, putting them into a high pressure water chamber and pressurizing it up to a very high pressure. I don't have it in front of me, but it's like 80,000 PSI or something, which is said to be equivalent. There's the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench or whatever. It's like if you were to take a submarine down with a bottle of juice all the way to the deepest part of the ocean and hold it underwater for a few minutes. And that pressure kills most things in the juice without destroying the nutritional content. And the studies show that, so there's been studies where they test the juice before it goes into HPP and immediately after. And there is a lot more nutritional content compared to like heat pasteurization still in the juice, and enzymes. It does kill some enzymes, but most of them are still there. But that is testing right after the process. So there haven't been any studies that I've seen where you're testing juice that's been on a grocery store shelf for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks. So they can get up to like 30 to 60 day shelf life on HPP. So I've yet to see any test after a few weeks. Just something I'd like to do someday.
Isn't there like tons of variable factors as well? Depending on how long the juice sits before it's actually ran through the process, what kind of pressure they add and for how long. There's a lot of kind of fine tuning to get the correct amount, right? Yeah, so like whether you pressurize it for 4 minutes or 40 minutes is going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And if you drop off the juice at the HPP facility and they let it sit on a pallet in their warm warehouse for 2 hours, that's going to make a big difference. There are definitely lots of factors involved. I don't know if you guys remember, but there's this big event where the FDA forced grocery stores nationwide to rip down nut milk, HPP nut milk off the shelves, because generally the amount of time they were pressurizing it for was not enough because of the low acidity in almond milk. So a bunch of companies had to take it out of the grocery stores and then, get it what do you call it, Ari, when you have them analyze it and Not sure.
when they to do like a study to say yes, it's safe. or
Oh,
whatever.
for
Get like maybe get a variance on it, or I don't think that's the term I'm looking for, but anyway, they had to work with the FDA and get
Yeah, it's a study they do. It's a kind of study. I can't remember what
Validation.
study it is.
validation.
Yeah,
study.
validation
Thank
study.
you.
yeah.
Yes, they had to revalidate it with the FDA and come to an agreement about the sort of processing times and everything before they could sell it again. I think a lot have switched to heat pasteurization after that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know. Is there anything to add on that?
Well, I think
No.
another variance also is what the original pH level is of the juice
Correct.
before
Yeah.
it's HPP'd. So not every single juice that you get HPP'd will have the same shelf life. But we are sort of backed up into a corner as Charlie said earlier, because of the case with Odwalla. But we really are backed up into a corner as an industry of only being able to sell out of our four walls or direct to the consumer. And so it is, HPP is a route that people take once they feel like, hey, like I either want to go mainstream with this and get this into like my local Whole Foods or my local grocery stores, or even it's becoming more and more difficult. Like, listen, I've been doing wholesale illegally, as many of us have, to other, well, it doesn't matter, because I will say, like I've always told my clients, like, look, just don't talk about it. But to be quite frank with you, the reason I'm mentioning it is because Department of Ag actually came in and ripped my raw juices from all my wholesalers. So I'm no longer illegal because I'm no longer able to wholesale my juice. But we were able to get away with it for so long because Department of Health is not who actually checks that. So Department of Health goes into the local grocery store, or the local farmer's stand or whatever, and inspects them. They're not the ones that actually check to see that Southern Fresh Juicery is being sold there and that it's raw and unpasteurized. Okay. But one thing that I did learn that I'm curious to find out, Chef, maybe but my local Department of Health inspector, I just went through an inspection, like right when I came back from Spain. Got 100, by the way. Thank you very much. But I will say he told me that this coming year, the Department of Health is going now under the Department of Ag. Now, what I don't know is if that's only in South Carolina or if that's nationwide. And so I didn't want to like pry too much, because you never want to like ask too many things to your Department of Health during an inspection. But one thing that I wondered is, is that going to change nationwide for all of us? And is that going to change the ability for many of us to sell wholesale? Like, is that going to be something that Department of Health is going to know? I just thought it was really coincidental. That this is the first time Department of Ag has checked. Yeah. Okay.
They change quite often. It depends on how the funding of the county or the state is. I know when I was in Vegas, they had the Department of Health did all the regular inspections, and then you go with certified organic. That's where you bring in the Department of Agriculture.
Right.
And then actually they didn't get all the funding they wanted, so the Department of Ag kind of passed that task off to like third-party certifiers. But it's constantly shifting in a lot of places, depending on how funding is. Some people get inspected, have always been inspected by the Department of Agriculture.
Gotcha.
They do their local restaurant inspections, so it just depends. It's interchangeable, really.
Yeah.
There's a new documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Poisonous. Have you guys watched it?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm in the middle of
was
it.
bad.
Oh, and the same night I was cooking chicken. Oh, it's terrible.
So
I couldn't eat it.
that white-haired lawyer in there,
Mm-hmm.
he is the guy that sued Odwalla for the raw juice stuff. He was the guy that handled like all the different lawsuits and stuff. I actually talked to the phone on him before with him before. And then the lady with the curly hair, that is Marion Nestle, who's written a bunch of books about this kind of stuff, including Unsavory Truth. I had to look behind me. It's on my shelf behind me. Called Unsavory Truth, which is all about how big food and beverage manipulates studies, just like the pharmaceutical industry, by like donating money and paying universities to run these studies, and how all the nutritional stuff out there is total bullshit about all these with all the supplements and everything. So Anyway, I think that's a great documentary that everybody should watch. And they talk about in there how complicated it is because there's Department of Ag, there's the FDA, there's local health departments, there's and it's all different everywhere, and so many different people regulating different.
It's super challenging.
Parts
Yeah.
of it. Mm-hmm.
I like how it shows so much about how large processors or manufacturers are the one that kind of mess it up for everyone. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's a problem with central process.
Mm-hmm.
If you, okay, let's say we go back to a couple hundred years ago where local communities all got their food from local sources. If there's an outbreak of something from one farm, it wasn't affecting thousands of people.
Yeah.
It was affecting 100 people or a couple hundred people, not like 10,000 or 100,000. You know what I mean? It was wasn't going out to 1,000 locations of whatever fast food restaurant. So it's, cheap food is good, but it also presents challenges with the food safety. So I do think large national distributors should be extremely tightly regulated, just because the chance for sort of a mass contamination is so high. But I think they should relax a little bit on the local guys, like street vendors. Like, give me a break.
Yeah,
you know when you're buying from a street vendor what you're buying.
Yeah.
That's
and you're
why
like,
I love,
is it worth maybe getting sick over this?
Yeah.
I think the cheesesteak is worth it.
Southeast Asia, right? You can walk around if you want to eat street food. It's delicious. It's probably not that safe, but that's why it costs $1, right? And I'm like, we're missing that in America. We're missing the street vendor culture. Like in America, you have to basically be a food truck, which is basically a regulated restaurant. You have to have a commercial kitchen, a 3-compartment sink, and you have to pass inspections and all this stuff. I think that is ridiculous, in my own opinion. I think I should allow small vendors to kind of have a lot looser regulations, and you just know as someone what you're risking, you know?
What's crazy too is like you mentioned Southeast Asia, or like you go into these markets or the wet markets or anything, and you're like, oh, that meat's not refrigerated, that produce is just sitting out, and you think in your head, oh, it's so dirty, but it's actually way better quality product than we can ever get here in the United States, you know, because it's all third process, and that stuff's just growing on their farm. They're pulling it and just have it on display to buy, and it's such higher quality product that you can't get here. If that vendor selling the unrefrigerated meat, if people get sick from buying from the vendor that day, you're talking about a few people, you know, not thousands. So I think I don't know. I think the regulation's too tough for small mom and pop shops in the U.S. and probably not tough enough for the national guys. Yeah.
Okay, so there's one more point I wanted to make about HPP. So they say it doesn't use heat, which is true that they're not adding heat, but there is something called adiabatic heating, where when you pressurize something and the molecules are bouncing around, like as you apply pressure to something, it does heat up. So it does absolutely heat up while it's under pressure. Now, when the pressure releases, it immediately cools back down again. But I do just want to make that point. And everyone that uses HPP or sells HPP equipment will tell you that it's different. It's not real heat. It's only adiabatic heat. But I mean, the only people that have ever argued with me about this have a stake in the HPP industry. So in my opinion, it is heated. Now, it's not as much as heat pasteurization, 140 degrees or whatever, but it's we'll go from, if you put it in at 45 degrees, it might get up to 60 or 70 degrees while it's under pressure. So it's still not as high as heat pasteurization, but there is some heat involved there. Okay, moving on to heat pasteurization. Also called, so this can be called HTST, high temperature short time pasteurization, can be called heat pasteurization or just pasteurization, or flash pasteurization is when you heat it up to a high temperature very quickly and then cool it back down again. So it's quite simply just cooking the product and killing the pathogens and microbes that way. Different products have different regulations about how much they have to be pasteurized. The dairy industry has very strict regulations about pasteurization to bring it up to X temperature for X amount of time. And not very popular in the cold press juice industry because it just sort of ruins the taste and the color of the juice. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to heat up green juice and drink it, but it becomes pretty gross, right, Ari?
Yeah. I've had people call me where you're very fortunate if your health department is educated and they're familiar with requirements. I've had people call me and their health departments ask them to bring up their juice to a boil and chill it down to pasteurize their product to sell it to consumers. I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
They're like, I can't afford a pasteurizer. They're like, you just bring it up to 141. And I was like, that's crazy. But
yeah. So not good for juice. There are some companies I've seen doing it. By the way, you're not required to put any of this on the label. Most people don't realize that. Like, you'll see it on the label on dairy products because it's actually like marketing, like, hey, this is safe because it's pasteurized. Or they might say like ultra pasteurized because you think, oh, it's safe for my kids. But you are not required to put pasteurized or HPP on the label. So there was a couple of class action lawsuits early on, maybe 2015, 2016, when cold pressed juice companies were labeling the juices raw. And there's class action lawsuits and there's private settlements, and they stopped calling it raw, but there's no law against it. They weren't breaking any laws. The class action lawsuit was more like, hey, that's false advertising. Like, you're tricking people. It's not raw. It's HPP'd. So
I wonder if that's another thing that's different. Yeah. State by state though. Because like when I was HPPing my juice out of Georgia, we were required out of a facility in Georgia, we were required to label it HPP before, before the state of Georgia would allow us to move it out of the state of Georgia. Like we had to go through
crossing state lines might be different.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like I know that our labeling was required to say HPP because now I'm stuck with all these labels that say HPP and I'm like, ooh, do I put them on raw juice? Do I not? But like these are things you deal with when you change directions in your company. It's like the same thing. Like if you've pre-labeled a bottle that says celery and then all of a sudden you take celery off, like how do you handle that? You've spent thousands of dollars maybe on labels or hundreds of dollars on labels. What do? Like
just tell people it means like happy produce
take
production.
A Sharpie to it. Yeah. Yeah. But so maybe you're right, Charlie. Maybe it's about when it was leaving the state of Georgia, it needed to be labeled as HPP. But for me, I mean, I think in our industry,
that might just be state specific too. Because I know
that's what I mean.
100% for sure. I think there still are national HPP companies.
Oh yes, that are not labeled as
labeling
HPP.
It HPP.
100%.
Yeah,
pretty sure.
That
which is crazy. Like at Goodnature, a bunch of my employees got together and wanted to do a juice cleanse, and they ordered juice from one of these companies. And I told them, I'm like, I'm surprised you guys wanted to do HPP juice for a juice cleanse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's not HPP. I'm like, yes, it is. Like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes,
Doesn't
it
say
is.
it anywhere, Charlie.
It's being shipped to you from California to New York State in plastic bottles and has like a 2-week shelf life. By the time it gets to you, how do you think it's not HPP? Like, well, it doesn't say it on the label. Yes, it doesn't, but it is 100%, 100% sure.
That must be the packaged farm fresh stuff that they say.
What's
you
that?
know, when they use the co-packers, when they HPP product, there's so many like weird terminology they throw out there just to like confuse people sometimes.
Yeah, well, like cold pressured was a big one for a while.
Yeah.
Which I think they stopped using that, hopefully because I was so vocal about it. Yeah, there's the Cold Pressure Council labeling everything cold pressured, which most people thought meant cold pressed.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous. I don't know if they're still doing that. I haven't seen it in a while. Oh man, the worst thing I ever saw was this company out of California. The label said made from raw ingredients. But then the label also said pasteurized on it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, that's
cool.
tricky. Yeah, the ingredients were raw. They're not saying it's raw juice. They're saying made from raw ingredients.
That's cool.
Very tricky. Yeah. All kinds of tricky labeling you can do.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we can get into UV pasteurization a bit, UV processing, whatever you want to call it, UV light filtering. So it was made popular in cider and wine. Basically, you pass it through a UV light multiple times, and you can achieve 5 log reduction that way. It works really well on juice that doesn't have a lot of... but juice that's pretty transparent, right? Like wine and cider, you can kind of see through it if you hold it up to a light. It doesn't work so well on some juices. Like it wouldn't... I don't think it would work well at all on nut milks or juices that are more opaque, like beet juice and carrot juice and that kind of thing. So it's a little bit tricky. You have to have a specialized machine that will pass through multiple times. But it is achievable. The most notable success story is the company Solti, S-O-L-T-I, based out of San Diego. Ryan is a good friend of mine, the founder, and they're in like 2,000 stores now. All of their little shots are 100% juice, and that's all UV process. And his larger drinks are more like, I guess you call them aids or like, teas. So like 15% juice or 30% juice or something like that. And those are UV. So he's been successful with it. He's got a proprietary process that includes the UV machine and like an aseptic bottle filler. It was like this crazy bottle filler, like $2 or $3 million bottle filler from Italy. They had to come install where the juice goes from the UV machine into the bottle filler and never touches the outside air. And so he's got this whole proprietary process where he made it work. Been very successful. I do not think it's realistic for any small or medium-sized companies to do this. Like if you want to get into UV, you've got to spend a lot of time. It's like a scientific process. You got to work with scientists. I would say if you're not putting like $5 million into a juice production facility, I don't think it's possible. Same with buying your own HPP machine. Don't even think about it if you don't have millions of dollars to spend. Like the HPP machine itself is like $500,000. Pasteurizers, $30,000, $60,000, something like that for a small one. But still, then you need all kinds of other stuff. You need conveyors and bottle fillers and whatever. So I would say don't even think about doing your own processing if you don't have like a real facility. You're spending millions of dollars.
I will say, Charlie, like I've run into a couple of clients that are producing their own juice on a Goodnature machine or whatever juicer that they're using. And then they're driving their juice to an HPP tolling machine and then picking it up and driving it back. And I've had to sort of poke the bear a little bit and say, like, look, because I've done HPP. We all know that. We've talked about that. We talked about why I did HPP. We started
you
that
use a
during
co-packer
COVID.
model, right? Like they were using your recipes.
Yes, we used a
making it
co-packer
for you.
model. Correct. Making it for us, same bottle. And they were doing HPP, taking it to a facility straight out of production, HPPing it, and then shipping it to me through my regional distributor. Clearly, food cost skyrocketed, went from like, a mid 30 to a high 50, 60, 70%. But at that point in Southern Pressed Juicery's journey as a business, it was still, even though we were making less money on that juice, we couldn't keep up with production. I mean, we had two X1s going 24/7, and that's just how much juice we were selling because of COVID. Okay, so it was either continue to make juice in-house, which we continue to do, and also supplement with HPP juice and make less on the HPP juice, or just cap yourself at the sales that you're making right now. So for us, it was, and we were also exploring the idea of like going into larger brick and mortar. So we continued to make juice and sale in-house and then did HPP. However, when I talk to people in the industry that are producing their own juice, driving it hours away. Now, I'm not talking about down the street. I'm talking about 2 to 4 hours away to a tolling facility to get a longer shelf life, to come back and sell it. I poke them to say, like, let's talk about the pros and cons of this, because I don't think that the extended shelf life is worth the additional cost that it's costing you to produce this juice. One, the tolling fee, the driving, the gas, your time that you could be making juice. And that's when I say, like, let's really look at what first of all, why are you doing this? And then let's look at your current production schedule and your current shelf life that you have on your juices. And let's see if, one, you're even getting that right. And two, are there ways that we can be more efficient with your production schedule and with your shelf life to extend those, going from a 3-day to a 5-day, from a 5-day to a 7-day, and fix your production schedule so that you're actually getting a longer shelf life than you're normally getting, but you don't need a 45-day shelf life or 30-day shelf life, and keeping all of your production in-house and making more money. So a lot of times people just think like, oh, I've put 3 days on my bottles and I can't keep up with the demand. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if you're really there yet. I really think we need to test all your pH levels, do a taste bottle. And like another thing, I like a tidbit, don't open the same bottle and taste from the same bottle every day. Like if you're trying to get a 7-day or whatever, and you're asking for a variant, I don't know, Chef, about you, but I prefer you hold back 7-10 bottles and open a new bottle every single day.
Yeah.
Make sure you're not opening and tasting the same bottle for 7-10 days in a row. But so those are all things you would do in the back of the house. But, most people, when they're asking, I think in our industry, the small to medium guys are looking at either freezing, HPP, which, as Charlie has said a lot of times, is rarely the way to go unless you're really large scaling this thing. And I have heard some, I think because of Salty, of the UV, like they're like, Olivia, can I put this in like a microwave sort of thing? And like, the UV thing, that's how they describe it. Like, I don't know why, maybe that's how they're like, I know it's some sort of UV thing, like where you can just like push the light over it. And, as they're sort of describing what that UV process is.
I have had some people reach out to me, and there is a company that is selling a UV thing for around $5,000.
Yes.
And I don't think it's real.
Yeah.
So it's like a really
Are they describing it as a microwave to you?
No. I don't know exactly.
All right. So the legit company that actually works is called Cidersure, Cidersure. Those are not $5,000. Those are more. And also, again, that's one part of the process. Like you need lots of other stuff. You can't just buy this machine and just like, oh, now I just put my juice in here. It's not how it works. You need pumps and you need conveyors and you need tanks. It's like a whole thing. But I have seen, there's like a company out of Turkey that advertises one, contact me a few times about trying to sell to our customers, which I haven't bothered. It's like, first of all, you don't even have a license to sell in the U.S. Like it's just a waste of time, honestly. I think. Yeah,
it's always important bringing a health department, because I hate when people buy something right off the bat and get, it accepted later, and it was basically like a tube, I think, that people were buying for like $5,000, and they said that it was like the UV tube. They pour it through and you're good, which is not.
It's just not going to work, guys.
But those are the three things.
This is cold pressed juice, okay? Get over it. Anyway.
Yeah, but I do think it's important to say, like, again, not to beat a dead horse, but taking it to the max amount that Department of Health will allow you and that you agree with a taste test and a look test, you can do multi-million-dollar juice business a year.
Absolutely.
Out of a 7-day shelf life. Like, I want that to be very clear. Southern Press Juicery does multi-million-dollar juices, annual revenue on 7-day shelf life. Now, I do have some variances. I do have enhanced waters that take me to a 21-day shelf life. But I mean, those are add-ons, and I do encourage you to, apply for a variance, do it the right way. And those are really just like kind of how you talked about salty a little bit.
Right,
it's like a little bit of water. Go ahead.
Let me give you a little story, okay? Early days of Juice Press New York. So Juice Press is probably the most successful multi-location cold press juice. Okay, I think they have like 35 locations in New York. Early days, they had an X1. They were running 3 shifts. 3 shifts on an X1, juicing 24 hours a day when they were expanding. They were making 2,000 bottles of juice in a 24-hour period. So when people tell me they're struggling and they can't make enough juice, it's like, yes, you can. I promise you, you can make 100 bottles of juice an hour if you have your processes under control. It's going to take multiple people, but it's possible. I've known multiple juice companies making 100 bottles an hour on an X1. I'm not saying you even have to make that many, but like you can make, on a full day, you can make 500 to 1,000 bottles of juice on an X1. So people saying that they can't make enough juice is they just don't have their processes in order.
Exactly.
And
right.
Yeah. And like Olivia said, you can have higher margins, you can have a better product and happier customers if you make the juice in the house than trying to go and work with some HPP tolling facility and drive plastic bottles back and forth in a van. It's just like, now you're spending all your money managing that relationship instead of making juice. I mean, all your time and all your money. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. Just focus on your business and make it work. If you can't make it work, call Ari and Olivia and they can absolutely help you. 100%.
Well, and a lot of times it's like, if you feel like you're running out and your, let's say your shelf life is on point, right? And your production is on point and you're doing the right thing, and you're just still not producing enough. And Olivia and Ari look at it and say, hey, you're doing the max of what you can do. Likely it's that now you've outgrown your machine. Like, it's time now for an X1, not an X1 mini. Like, there's times a lot of times a day that I listen to clients and I'm like, honey, you're in the wrong machine. Like, that was a great machine for where you were, but it's time to step up now. And like, quit looking for extra shelf life. Quit looking for all of these things. Like, the answer is you're ready for the next step up in a machine. Like, I talked to somebody the other day who has 2 X1s in one facility. And I was like, and it is nowhere near doing $1 million. And I'm like, whoa. Like, love that from a Goodnature perspective for Charlie. But, like, really, it's not really necessary. Like, that X1, sorry, Charlie, but that first X1 could have been going for a second or third shift. Like, just make sure that you're putting all of the things have to be in line, and that you're in the right machine. The chances that you just need more shelf lifetime is likely not your issue, I think, is the point of this whole conversation.
Yeah, and people get all bent out of shape, oh, I can't spend $25,000 on a machine. How much money are you spending on that would be going directly into your business, right?
Right.
Like, how many, it's got to not take that, like maybe a few months worth of juice selling of the margin you're losing on HPP,
right?
Driving back and forth and everything, where that is 25 grand right there. And that's happening every 3 months. You're spending 25 grand on margin on the juice,
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, like, one-time upfront costs for me as a business owner are so easy to make because it's just like, it's a one-time cost. The costs that are really hard to swallow as a business owner should be the recurring costs you're spending every week or every month. Those are the costs you should be really, really careful about taking on. Upfront costs that you're going to capitalize. Like, that's kind of an easy cost to make, expense to make.
Not to be salesy, but especially since you can finance it through Goodnature. Right. I mean, who does have an extra 25 grand sitting in their pocket? But if you can actually like make sense of it and run out all your numbers, like that's it just makes sense.
I mean, my point is like, that's an expense you need to figure out how to be able to make. That's like, instead of spending that money through the HPP guys and letting them pocket it, you should be getting that money in your business through your margins. So you need to borrow the money, you need to finance the machine, you need to do whatever you need to do, find an investor or whatever to be able to make that purchase. Instead of going an HPP route, I just think that's a mistake.
Yeah. And likewise, like if they're just putting a 3-day shelf life on everything, they're spending double on labor to be making the same juice that maybe could have had a 5-day shelf life, as long as the pH was there and the taste was there and all that stuff. So it's really important that you have all of the pieces down. And so, yeah, that's what the number one thing I run into all the time is like, their production schedule is great, but their shelf life is off, or their shelf life is great, but the production is off. Like it's rare to find that somebody has all of the pieces correctly.
Right. Okay, let's jump into everyone's favorite topic. Can you freeze cold pressed juice and ship it to people?
Slash the juice, sell frozen juice.
Yeah,
like just out of your store.
I don't have a lot of experience with frozen juice. I have frozen juice and drank it after it thawed, and I would say some recipes are fine. Like pure apple cider is fine.
Yeah.
Some juice changes, but I don't know. I don't have a ton of experience, so I'll let you guys kind of take this one. Ari, do you want to?
Yeah.
First?
So, first of all, you can't freeze and ship juice. People do it.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Okay. People do it. That's the answer to that. But people definitely do it. As far
so
as
you're saying
know,
that's not an approved method of preserving juice? Okay.
Definitely you can't freeze and ship raw juice, But what happens is when you freeze a product, the ice crystals expand, and then you thaw it, they shrink back down, and it weakens the cellular structure of the product. So if you blast chill something, the ice crystals will be smaller. If it takes a longer time, they'll be larger. But what that leads to is a product after it's thawed. And definitely all produce reacts a little bit differently to this because their cellular structure is different. But once you thaw the product, it's going to, in most cases, it's going to separate almost instantly. It's not going to look good. And it's going to taste like it's diluted, like you added water to the product. You can make kind of adjustments to counteract that, by adding more citrus, more ginger, stuff like that to make it more potent to kind of counteract how it tastes diluted. But I mean, that's what you're up against when you freeze a product and then thaw it and consume it. Personal consumption, yeah, that's totally fine. But just be prepared if you're selling frozen juice that your customers know that. And they're okay with that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we've toyed around with. I just want to be clear what a blast chiller is. It's an actual type of freezer that brings temperatures down much faster than a regular commercial freezer or something like that. And so I partnered with a local culinary school when we were looking at shipping to see if that was, it all needs to be a test. I would just say, like, don't bank on all of this stuff working. Like, same thing as like selling wholesale. If you're not pasteurizing the juice, like if you can do it and it's cherry on the top, great. But same thing with shipping, like, so that's what a blast chiller is. Let me just say that. Second of all, I do encourage my customers to freeze their juice at home if they need to. Like if I'm running a 6-pack sale and the person says to me, oh, I'd really like to do this. I want to take advantage of it before I leave town, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish it all. I'll say, just freeze it or share it with your friends, right? I give them the permission because, quite frankly, at the end of the day, I want their $55 for a 6-pack because I'm here to make sales, right? And it's perfectly fine for them to freeze the juice if that's what they choose to do at home. I, however, do not freeze juice and sell it to people. I just don't. I feel like I've got a window. I've got window into my X1. They can see production happening. I'm, extend the shelf life as much as I feel like is safe for everybody and looks good for the product. And we've got our production down that we're making juice every single day. So they can come in at any point and get juice that's going to be good for 5 or 7 days out. And if they want to freeze it, great. But first of all, I don't have the freezer space. Second of all, or the time. I have my production too smooth to need to freeze juice, if I'm being quite honest. But I do say you can freeze it at home if you want. I'm just not going to freeze it for you.
Yeah. I think some of this like a lot of the stuff we're talking about here is people really want to have a juice business, but some don't want to figure out how to do the hard stuff, right?
Yes, correct.
Like get an efficient production going, have fresh juice in the fridge. They want to just like make a little bit of juice, and if they don't sell it, I'll freeze it and then sell the rest later.
Right.
And then, you know what I mean? It's like, guys, juice is tough.
Yeah,
like, juice is
it's
a hard
not an
business.
easy business. Yeah.
It's a very perishable product. It's like there's so many variables in it. It's a really hard business. And you got to be ready to really get your production in line to be able to give people the product that you're charging $8 or $10 for, which is fresh, raw, cold pressed juice.
Right.
Period.
Yeah. I mean, and then you got to think about, okay, well, Olivia, what do I do with the juice that's expiring? Well, listen, like you got to make a decision. Sometimes, it depends on how much is expiring. If there's 3 or 4 bottles, I give it to staff, or I take it home, or I give it to a new customer or an existing customer. I say, hey, this is expiring today. You're buying something else, but just take it on me. Like I'm building that community either within my staff or within my customers. Or if I had a rain out, like, everybody on the East Coast just had this crazy storm, and I'm sure sales have been down for 1 or 2 days for most of us. Like at that point, if I have 25 of one flavor left over that didn't sell, that's expiring, I've got to take into consideration, like, is this a bestseller or is this a medium seller? What time of the day is it? What does traffic look like today? But I may put that juice on sale at 8 in the morning. I may put it on sale at 2 in the afternoon. It just depends.
Yeah.
And you do have to sort of balance that out. It's not something that you want to be having juice on sale every single day. But as you're figuring out your pars, as you're figuring out your production, like that's something that you probably run into. Like a lot of times I make clients overproduce because they've been underproducing, and I can't figure out how many juices a day they're going to sell until they have a crap ton of juice in their fridge. And then I can say, okay, we're consistently only selling 15 bottles of this juice a day. So let's take production to 20 bottles or whatever it is. So, people worry about becoming a discount model. So they're like, well, either I become a discount model and I sell my juice at 50% off, or I freeze it and then I can, just sell it frozen. Those are things that you have to decide as a brand. Like, how am I going to handle this cost of doing business, of the fact that from time to time there is going to be waste, and what do I do with that waste?
Absolutely. It's a totally normal part of a food and beverage business is waste.
As long as it's not huge, right?
Correct.
I definitely get like that solves all their waste issues. But what I would recommend is have kind of a process in which you go when you're introducing, adjusting your processes or bringing in new products or sourcing new products. I recommend probably setting up something where you have your steps 1, 2, 3, 4, however many you need. And I think the number one thing, what I would always have, it's up to you, your operation, you're responsible, is, does it affect the quality of the product? If it does, I just stop and I think about something else.
Right.
If it doesn't affect the quality of product, then I'll move on to the next one. Like, is it cost effective? How much is the labor? And follow those steps through every single change that you're thinking about doing. But I think it's very important to have that as your number one step is, does it affect the quality of the product at the end of the day?
Yeah, and there's other ways to deal with waste. Yeah, other than just like, putting everything at 50% off and selling it. You could, if you're really watching your sales and and you're watching the weather and you're like, there's a storm tomorrow, I've got 20 of this SKU left over. Like, you can be proactive with your sales and teach your team, hey, for the next day and a half before we put this juice on sale, that's a last resort. We're going to sample this juice out. It's just like Costco. I mean, like anything you sample out, you're going to sell. So feature that juice on your social media, sample it out, give it out, like put it in 8-ounce bottles. Maybe it'll be easier for you to sell it. You can open it, date it the same date, and put it in 8-ounce bottles. I've done that before, where I'm like, hey, juice has got a 1-day shelf life. I'm not selling it in 16 ounces. I'll do it in 8 ounces, 1-day shelf life. They're freebies. Buy a 6-pack. I'll give you a free juice. There's different ways to handle waste while you're figuring out your production. But the bottom line is you want to get to a place where you don't have a lot of waste and you're not underproducing.
Yeah. I mean, you're never not going to have waste. You're always going to have some waste.
Sure.
But if the amount of waste you have, if it's consistent and it's a large amount, you have to change your process for sure. And you have to get organized.
Yeah.
Well, what else do you guys want to talk about?
This might be a two-parter.
God,
Good
who's
Nature
getting so
Radio
fired
episode.
up, Charlie? Damn it.
I told you we should have saved freezer for next week.
How about freeze drying? How about vaporizing
Blast
into
versus
powder?
But where do I order labels from?
Nobody ever asked that question. All right. If anyone has any questions about this, leave a comment in the YouTube video, or you can the radio at goodnature.com. Better yet, head over to the Good Nature Juicing Facebook group, ask there, and get lots of good input from everybody in the industry. Thanks everybody for listening or watching, and see y'all next Friday.
This week I did it my way. Baby say oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.